Immigration. It's one of America's biggest political debates spanning decades. With public opinion on policy,
mass migration has to be met with these mass deportations.
We don't need ICE in the community right now.
falling along political lines. But the issue isn't isolated to border towns or so-called sanctuary cities.
I was a little scared, I'm not gonna lie.
We're not gonna violate anybody's Fourth Amendment.
I think the best word would be chaotic.
Stories of immigration, from arrests to detentions, court proceedings to legal paths, are unfolding in Kansas City.
I'm KCTV5's Lauren Magarino. 1 year after federal actions on immigration, we uncover how they are changing lives here.
As we take this issue beyond the border.
Welcome back into Behind the Story. I'm Katie Bird, joined with KCTV5 anchor Lauren Magarino. Lauren, thanks so much for sitting down with me to feature Beyond the Border.
Happy to.
Yeah, I'm curious, what inspired this special report?
So this special report was inspired by part of what we saw and what we just watched right there. It was the No Kings protests that were happening first in July of last year, pretty much in the summer, June, July. And I think that seeing this response to things that were happening in Los Angeles and response to things that were happening in other cities across the nation, but primarily Los Angeles at the time, coupled with some incidents that had gotten widespread attention here in Kansas City, really prompted me to be curious about what immigration enforcement looked like on the ground here. At that point in time, there really wasn't a lot of information or concrete data available to be able to gauge how many people exactly were being affected by this. And I felt like that was a very important question to answer, because for those who are not in favor of this type of immigration enforcement, they would want to know the scope and scale of it, but also those who voted for it and want to know that the administration is following up on its promise to crack down on immigration and get mass deportations underway. So that's really what inspired this reporting.
Yeah, in the report, it walks through the arrests, the detentions, the court proceedings, and the legal pathways. It's almost like chapters. So why tell the story this way?
So I realize with a lot of immigration enforcement and stories that are on it, it tends to be very reactive, right? There's an incident that happens, we're capturing either that incident itself or the protest in response to it. And it's just very flash pan moment, and it almost feels like it's just not tied together. And the reality is this is a U.S. immigration system with immigration law, and there are so many parts to it. And I don't want to describe it as a pipeline, because some would argue that the system is very disjointed, and one source had described it like a dilapidated house that has been getting basically patchwork along the way. But I will say there is a through line that I thought was really important to bring to viewers, so it didn't feel like it was just reactive. And a lot of times when you look at reporting, which is important to do in the moment, and you know, those day of stories, we have to cover them, but you also tend to see reaction saying, or sometimes implying, well, where are you digging into the data for this, or actually getting deeper? And so this was us getting deeper. This was us taking the time to be able to provide more context to a major issue.
Yeah, and so this report not only features stories from people, but also highlights several significant statistics on immigration enforcement. I'm curious, where did the data come from, and how did you analyze it?
So the data is coming directly from the federal government. It's coming from ICE. And the way that we were able to obtain it is through two groups. One is called the Deportation Data Project, and the other one is called Track Immigration. And I want to start with Deportation Data Project because they were able to obtain the information from ICE specifically on arrests and detentions, while Track Immigration was able to get the information for immigration court. So, you know, you're really spanning the bulk of the system there between those two groups. But one thing that they both did was that they were filing FOIA requests, and they do this routinely to get this information from the federal government. These are public records requests. Many journalists file them often to, you know, get sunlight essentially on information that we believe is important for the public to know. And so for a topic like immigration enforcement and getting a good understanding of what the numbers are actually looking like, what the scale is actually looking like, you need that data. And so They are routinely filing those FOIAs, sometimes even going to court and legally fighting to get that information. And it usually is released by quarter. So we were able to get our hands on that. And we'll show you, for those of you who are watching this, what you originally get. This is like the raw Excel file that ICE provides. And so this is why we take the time as journalists to go through this for you, so you don't have to dig in. You can if you want, but to really sort through and figure out exactly how this affects our region in particular. So you can see that there are columns when we focus on this arrest in particular, showing the apprehension date, the apprehension location, you know, who led on that apprehension in particular. And so, you know, filtering through that. I also want to show you the detentions as well, because a lot of this data, you know, analysis, you can't just look at it raw and be like, okay, this is, you know, here's the information. There's a bit of cleaning up that you have to do. So transparently giving you an example here, when it came to detentions, we often see people are detained and moved around, booked into different facilities. So you can't look at this spreadsheet and go, okay, well, I see there's X many entries. That means there's X many detentions. No, there are unique identifiers that are all the way, and you can probably see it here on the right side of this Excel sheet. Those represent people, those unique identifiers. And so we had to go in and basically format it to highlight how many times one person has moved and make sure they're only counted once, to have a more accurate understanding of how many detentions there were in Missouri and in Kansas, and then boiling it down to the metro as well. So, you know, you get a raw file. We've cleaned it up. We've analyzed it ad nauseum. I learned a lot about the language that ICE uses to be able to mark down its arrests and detentions. I will say courts were easier. Track Immigration, shout out to them, because they make it incredibly user-friendly to be able to parse through. Anybody who's interested, you can go on their website yourself and find a lot of information there in a way that's easy to digest.
And all of this does take time. I mean, you started reporting on this back in July. We're talking over 6 months. So why did it take half a year?
Part of it was what we were just talking about, obtaining the data. And like I said, it comes out quarterly, and even then it might take some time. So we were trying to make sure that we could get as much information as possible and not put the cart in front of the horse, as they say, and when we can wait and get a better idea of what this is looking like, especially if we're trying to understand how immigration policy that, I mean, day one of President Trump's return to the White House kicked off, right? That we remember the slew of executive actions that he signed having to do with many issues, but primarily immigration. And now, a year after that, get a good understanding of how that enforcement has played out. And so that was important to wait for that information. The other part of it is it's obviously a really sensitive subject, very sensitive. And so for everybody that we spoke with, I mean, again, about a dozen, a little over that, it took time to develop trust. It took time to develop relationships. It took time for people to feel like they were at a place that they were comfortable to talk about something. And I really appreciate the fact that they were open to share their stories with us, so everybody could learn something. And I hope that that's what's happening here, is that people are able to take something away and to walk away more informed. And that's really not easy to do without those people contributing their stories. So it was giving it the time for people to be a little bit comfortable to be able to open up and share.
So, Lauren, after all of this time, what story stays with you the most?
There are several conversations that have stayed with me. I think what I keep coming back to is observing immigration court in particular. The public, you can go at any point. You're able to sit in on these hearings and see how they're conducted and kind of what the cases are like. I had never experienced anything like that. And so after several days of going and sitting in for hours and just taking notes and watching how this played out, I remember there was one woman in particular who appeared for her hearing. She is an asylum seeker from Nicaragua, and she came dressed and, ready to present her case. And it was her first hearing. So usually in the first hearing, they're basically trying to make sure that they have all the accurate information, that she was fingerprinted, making sure that that's good to go, asking if she has a lawyer, if she doesn't have a lawyer, providing resources for her to acquire one, and setting the next hearing date. So it's pretty administrative, it's pretty routine, especially with that first one. And when she walked out, I wanted to speak with her. And so I remember myself and our colleague, Ali Espinosa, we stepped outside and just talked to her and said, who we are, where we're coming from. I had my badge on, my that says very clearly that I'm with KCTV5. And she was so nervous. I feel nervous even describing the story because it was, an energy thing where you could feel an anxiety. And she said, please don't take me. And I just remember looking at her being like, I'm a journalist. I'm not taking you anywhere. I just want to ask you a few questions if you're okay with that. And she just broke down. And it was that. I'm never going to forget that.
Wow, Lauren, that's such a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that today. On Behind the Story, I really appreciate you sitting down with me on KCTV5 Plus to feature your special Beyond the Border.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.